let's be real, this is the only topic that people care about right now. Did Yuki Tsunoda crash the car in practice, and is Max Verstappen about to pummel him into the dust? Well, I hate to disappoint you, but turns out, no. Allow me to indulge your curiosity as to Yuki Tsunoda's first day as Max Verstappen's sidekick. At last, you and I said in unison, a positive story about Red Bull racing. I think we are all thankful for that. Granted, my findings are being assessed and evaluated from all of the stuff that happened before qualifying, and of course the expected rain on Sunday, so things could easily change. But when it comes to Tsunoda's first day in the office, actually doing stuff on a live track during a live Formula 1 session, I think we've got cause to be cautiously optimistic that maybe finally Red Bull might have turned a corner, because as I, and probably you, have been told throughout your lives, first impressions are everything. And according to one Yuki Tsunoda in front of his home crowd, first practice may have been a bit messy, but otherwise a good sesh. Casual enough for colloquialisms, eh, Yuki? Interesting. In a good way. Now, I understand that you may decide to bring up pre-practice too. Max Verstappen 8th, Yuki Tsunoda 18th, and go, Law, you thought that was a good sesh? Oh no, Yuki's washed 18th. It's all Liam Lawson all over again. Let me just tell you that FP2 was no use to anybody. We had 4 red flags, 40 minutes roughly, where the cars couldn't do anything. Therefore, every single team and their plans were completely thrown to the wind to then set off fires throughout the entire track, as we saw on 2 of those red flag occasions. However, we can take 2 things away from these sessions. First, Yuki indeed didn't crash the car. Good. And second, he wasn't that far behind Max Verstappen in the first session, when arguably he would have been even more unaware of what the car could do. Super! And one curious note, in Sector 2, when you take the driver's best sector times throughout the entire FP1 session, Tsunoda's was about a 10th faster than Max's, through the Degners and through to Spoon, a highly technical section featuring, of course, the famous hairpin. That's a strong early marker. But okay, you probably want to know what Yuki himself made of his first practice sessions with the Red Bull Racing operation. Here they are. FP1 was better than expected. A good start for myself, and FP2, I didn't set a lap time. I think a lot of work to do. Slightly struggled, or something that we need to look through in the data. So far it's okay. Just have to build up some confidence more. It's a bit different to how the simulator felt, to be honest. Maybe a little bit more than I expected in terms of car feeling. I knew anyway that it was going to be a bit different in the real car. It was just a little bit more exaggerated in the rear car, feeling a bit more tricky. Okay, so a bit of a mixed bag then, not completely disastrous. He does recognise more work needs to be done, but he did have a good sesh. Especially since you really got to understand that the Racing Bulls cars were faster in FP2, with Hadjar 3rd and Lawson 5th. Yeah, I took a look at some of the New Zealand publications. Oh, they're having a field day with this one. So, the brass tacks. How did Tsunoda's first day go? In short, promising but mixed. He was just a 10th off Max Verstappen in FP1, which is a strong sign of adaptability, but again, FP2 proved trickier. Not just for Yuki, but Max as well. What I think will really give Yuki a little bit more confidence in his own ability is that Max himself struggled around the Suzuka circuit, him calling the RB21 difficult to string together a good lap. But what is important is that both drivers are on the same page, that some things need to be done. I mean, sure, Yuki isn't on fire, but nobody expected him to be on fire. Unlike the track. Must be the lack of water. Okay, jokes aside. The fact that Yuki is on it in terms of feedback is a huge deal. Red Bull now have not only Max providing feedback to find ways to bring the RB21 back to some semblance of order, but now Yuki can provide some intel at the same time. Because you've only got to look at the struggles that Liam Lawson was having to face, that he was in no position to provide any meaningful data to try and fix the car. Quite honestly, he was fighting for his life to keep the car pointed forward. How could he provide any meaningful data in that environment with not that much runtime over a Grand Prix weekend in only your 12th and 13th races in Formula 1? He has presented on a circuit, not just in the simulator, the ability to provide precise and constructive feedback. That's a significant boost for Red Bull right when they needed it, right at their lowest ebb. Having a driver who can communicate effectively about the car's behaviour, who doesn't hail from the Netherlands, enables the team to make informed setup adjustments and strategic decisions that aren't geared toward Verstappen and produce a more well-rounded machine. And in turn, it lessens the responsibility of Max to do all the heavy lifting, and it just reminds me of what Yuki Tsunoda was doing with AlphaTauri in 2023. He was carrying that team, whilst Nick de Vries was having an absolute mardy of it, really underperforming in terms of expectations. 11th, maybe a cheeky 10th, 11th. He was giving that team some hope. It means that Max can do more for his own race instead of having to solely carry the team in hopes of keeping up with Mercedes and Ferrari. And I'm not really counting McLaren, because based on Friday practice, so yeah, they've got this in the bag. It's just a question of whether Lando or Oscar will finish ahead of the other. Now, this is all well and good, Law, but we have seen this play before. But as the season progresses and the development team get completely blinkered as to what Max needs and wants, they completely lose sight of the second car, they're completely lost at sea, and that therefore enforces and sustains the Red Bull second seat curse. Yes, you are quite right to have some trepidation going into this race weekend that Yuki Tsunoda will merely be the next sufferer of that curse. However, I have news to tell you, courtesy of an article that I saw via motorsport.com, which did raise my spirits in that regard. And I don't have to make a video which is just me being negative about them. I don't want to be doing this anymore. I just want to see that there's some change going on, and thankfully, there is. Maybe the team will subvert expectations and, not be obsessed of just helping out Max. And it helps that both Christian Horner and Helmut Marko here, for once, are in agreement. So here is what Christian said. Ahem. I think we have to provide a different setup. Max's ability to extract lap times from the car is unique. And I think that we haven't seen another driver able to do that in the way that Max is able to. And so therefore, I think you need to give almost a calmer car to whoever is the partner driver, to give a more settled and predictable feel. That's not necessarily the quickest car, but it is definitely a more confidence-inspiring car for whichever driver. And also, Marko's comments hinted another key shift on a more technical level rather than a PR level ready for mainstream audiences to consume in the case of Christian. According to Dr. Marko, Red Bull is now working to expand the RB21 setup window, finally, even if it does mean sacrificing outright performance. That's a departure, a real departure, from Pierre Vachey's previous philosophy, which favoured peak performance over drivability. But it seems internal pressure has now finally forced a rethink, making the car more manageable for both drivers. After all, many instances over the last year or so have pointed towards Max trying out just about anything to try and get any sort of performance and potential out of the car. You saw multiple times where Max would be in the bottom half of the pack, 14th, 15th, then suddenly you see in FP3, he's right back at the top again, and then somehow he's able to put the car on the first couple of rows. How does he do it? Well, because basically he's thrown everything at the car but the kitchen sink. So maybe if the RB21 ends up to be a more flexible car, Max doesn't have to dedicate as much time to just try everything in hopes that it would work, that something sticks. He can actually focus with his team a better race plan, for example. Something a bit more versatile. More time in that department for Sunday, rather than just trying to get a decent result in qualifying and therefore not have to cut through as much traffic and maybe hold position around like 3rd or 4th or 5th or something like that. And throughout all of this, even though I do praise Red Bull for maybe putting out a couple of fires here, unlike the circuit, I do feel that one wild card and potentially a future scapegoat will be the likes of Pierre Vachey. Because you've only got to look at Racing Bulls, them performing well using RB20 components, and Joey Eggington having been at the helm for its development before then heading over to Red Bull Advanced Technologies to hold position. It's not impossible to imagine a reshuffle in the not-too-distant future. Maybe we might see something akin to what's going on with Dan Fallows, him stepping back from duties in terms of the aero department, stepping back in time for the eventual arrival of Enrico Cardile, as well as the rejigging from the absolute puppet master that is Adrian Newey on the technical side and partner of the team. Who's to say that Joey Eggington will be then put into Red Bull Racing to develop future cars, and Pierre Vachey takes on a backup role or something like that, lucky to even have a job after the shenanigans of the past couple of years, irking the likes of Max Verstappen. But my point is that maybe, finally, Red Bull are seeing the light at the end of their tunnel vision that is just making a car that will best suit Max. I mean, took them long enough. Of course, we're only 2 sessions into Tsunoda's tenure as Verstappen's teammate. There are plenty of things that could occur after that, and the rain expected on Sunday could throw many theories and run plans out the window, and maybe throw some drivers off the track. All of that is perfectly valid, but like I said earlier, first impressions are everything. Now, even though there is more to be discussed and further developments that could be seen on the track, we are starting to see throughout particular headlines more and more information seeping out from what was discussed at those 2 emergency meetings that Red Bull had last week, including the biting of the bullet when it comes to the biggest elephant in the room of Red Bull. That is, of course, the car. Fix the car. And if these upgrades that Red Bull have brought to the Japanese Grand Prix are anything to go by, this might be a sign that they are about to, change the fudging car. In essence, these upgrades surrounding the back of the car, according to the FIA's report on the show and tell, are, according to Chief Engineer Paul Monahan, there to reduce overall temperatures under racing conditions, thusly ridding themselves of those cutouts which impact the aero, whilst also preserving the effectiveness of the rear wing, leading to better overall performance. And based on the comments that we've heard from Yuki and Max, it has done something for the better. It's been a positive step forward, but then you look to Max's comments and realise that there is more going on with the RB21 which needs to be addressed. Hey, maybe this initial rear package, it might be a start. However, one of the biggest points of consideration to be had here is how Yuki Tsunoda establishes himself with the senior team and hopefully completely just destroy all the preconceptions that came in relation to whether or not he would even be considered for a promotion. Well, it looks like, based on what Christian has been saying, even though you might want to take it with a pinch of salt in terms of the sake of PR, well, yes, he might have done. Horner spoke at length to Sky Sports about how calm Yuki had been in recent days throughout all the turmoil of the driver swap, with his work in the simulator and then the lead up to Free Practice 1 particularly interesting. And oh yeah, he also addressed the theories and speculation that maybe Max and Yuki's car had differences which may have flattered Tsunoda's pace for the sake of a publicity stunt. Now, I can understand why you might think this. Glory runs, what have you, it's Japan, Yuki's Japanese, it's going to go down well with the home crowd. Yeah, I get that. But according to what Christian has been saying, and the larger situation going on with the team, there is surely no time for any of that frippery and buffoonery and gamesmanship. No, they need to fix the car. So, here's what Christian said regarding Yuki. They were both identical engine modes. I think that's a positive start for Yuki. He knows the circuit very well here. His feedback is very clear, very concise on the car. So, it's just the start of his journey with the team and plenty to get into. He certainly made in a high-pressured situation a positive start, and he just needs to build on that now through the rest of the weekend. He brings experience, and I think that knowledge is very useful. The season is all going to be about a development race, and that's why we took the decision early. I think Liam would have got there, but it might have taken 5, 6, 7 races or half a season. We don't have that amount of time, so, after discussing it internally, we decided, right, we've got to rip the plaster off now and get on with it. And that's what we chose to do. And Yuki has jumped in and done a good job initially. Oh, it feels so good to hear Christian say that. And especially after all the bump he said over the winter as to why the team chose Liam over Yuki for the second seat. Now, this is not a dig at Lawson, by the way. This is more in relation to the people responsible for making this call. I also don't want to get into the details about all of the deflecting that Helmut Marko partook in trying to blame Adrian Newey as to why Yuki Tsunoda wasn't considered. I talked about that at great length in my video yesterday. You can either look at it up top here or up top there, wherever it is currently. But the fact of the matter is this, that back in December, Liam has got the right characteristics, the right strength of character to deal with the pressure that comes with being Max Verstappen's teammate. That was reported by Thomas Mayer. Well, no, he was wrong about that. Now, I could easily spend a lot of time yapping on about potential theories as to why Christian Horner may have chosen to snub the likes of Yuki, even though it was looking particularly obvious. Maybe there was a disinclination of promoting a Honda-backed driver for the longest time, even though Yuki isn't anymore, especially with Ford around the corner for 2026. They're beginning their lives together with Red Bull powertrains powered by Ford and all that stuff, so having a Honda driver there as well, it's a bit of a conflict of interest, right? Maybe he fears that Yuki might crash out emotionally and just go back to his old ways, and therefore he would have to put out many fires in terms of just going, oh, well, Yuki had a bad time. He had to come up with many excuses, and he was dragged through a lot last year, and I don't think he really wants to repeat that, especially in the beginning with Liam and having to put out those particular blazes. And of course, the biggest thing to consider as part of my theory, so you know what, I'll bring out the foam of doubt throughout all of this, is that, put simply, I believe there was a lot of contractual shenanigans going on with Liam Lawson, a lot of bluffing from his own particular camp as to getting a seat with a Red Bull racing car of some description. And maybe for the fact that Liam Lawson was a homegrown talent, unlike Yuki, who was parachuted in via the Honda deal to be part of the Red Bull Junior team. But then at the same time, you could easily say that Max Verstappen was parachuted into the Red Bull Junior team weeks before he got his FP1 session with Toro Rosso. So anyway, the important thing to address is that finally, Christian may be beginning to consume some humble pie. Wake up, smell the coffee, or whatever wordplay he chooses to use in a particular moment. That, hey, maybe Yuki has grown up, and it is indeed worth it in giving him a go. Oh, by the way, for anyone wondering whether or not Christian Horner actually has ever said, give it a go, well, he did back in 2021 in relation to sprint weekends and stuff like that. This call may have had to put that all to the wayside, and performance being the main watchword. The matter has become bigger than whatever's been going on in the background, because it's become more and more obvious that there is no room to play silly buggers with any of their drivers anymore. They've got to find the best driver for the job to try and make sure that Max has a good wingman behind him. That means he has a chance in defending his world title, that Red Bull has a decent shot at maintaining at least third in the constructors, you know, to make sure that they don't trigger any potential clause in Max Verstappen's contract that could give him the right just cause to leave the team with no penalty on his part. It's imperative that Red Bull has a driver ready to go that can provide Max everything he needs, that he feels comfortable, he feels happy, he feels heard, and putting Yuki in that seat and not changing again for the rest of the season, according to Helmut Marko, that's a bit of stability. That is a start, but more needs to be done. But at least we're seeing something. And especially going into a brand new chapter of this team with their own powertrain unit. They're no longer having to rely on another supplier. They're doing it all on their own. And they need continuity, including having Max keeping faith with the entire project. And thankfully, so far, it's working. It's providing a solid start and some meaningful feedback that can then expedite the development of the car into something versatile and usable. Whether or not Yuki brings in big points immediately, his ability to just decode the car at all, unlike Lawson, who was frankly, as Netflix has put it, driving to survive, then in turn translates simulator work into actionable insights, that's already paying off. So I'm really pleased to see that finally he is actually providing evidence to change Christian Horner's perception of him. And if the RB21 ends up being a car which is a little bit more flexible to set up and dial in, even though outright peak performance is therefore curtailed or blunted, at that point, it may not matter. Max can make any sort of car work to provide some kind of results. He may be happy about that he doesn't have to lean on his own raw talent to make up the difference, that maybe he can then pull it back a little bit, let the car do some of the work, because that's what all the other teams are doing, but maybe it can finally break the curse which arguably started after Daniel Ricciardo skipped town. Sure, it's too early to say whether or not Max will remain with the team through to the end of his current deal, but if the upper management can demonstrate more and more instances of swallowing pride, addressing the machine which they used to go racing, then perhaps there is a cause to feel a little bit more upbeat. And like I said before, if Yuki Tsunoda can hit the ground running and provide some good solid points to try and fend off the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes, then maybe all of the drama the team has seen at the beginning of this season may be a complete bygone. That is the narrative that Red Bull wants to see, and thankfully they are taking steps to try and make it happen instead of just carrying on with what they were doing before and just developing for Max alone. They're doing something for Yuki now. Yeah, it would have been great for Checo to get some of that love, but hey, at least he's now seeing it finally being addressed that he was right all along. And I know that some of you might be thinking, well, if the Racing Bulls car is so much faster, then why doesn't Max go and race that car for the rest of the season? Yes, I know. The Red Bull group has the means to just change their drivers at whim, but I think Max's contract is probably a little bit more nuanced than the other ones. Transferring Liam and Yuki, there's not really that much disruption, but with Max, you gotta consider sponsors. I don't think Oracle would be that happy if the guy who brought so much success to that team goes to join the junior team. There's too much red tape going on for that to happen, even though it does flicker amongst my thoughts, actually. I do want to yap about it, but I know I can't. There is not a big enough piece of foam for me to wield to be able to run with that theory. You just think about that yourself. And oh yeah, one more thing. For any of those thinking that comments made by the two Red Bull racing drivers recently regarding supposed trust issues and leaving one to fend for themselves as a sign they don't like each other, do not think that. There is far more to it than that. Yes, Max did say something along the lines that Yuki should be able to figure some things out for himself. And Yuki did say that he reckoned that if he did tap Max on the shoulder and ask for some advice, that he wouldn't get the full story. But there is more to it than that. This is not a sign that these two are about to take each other down. What this is saying is that they're both on the same page. They have a consensus that the car needs to be fixed, and Yuki cannot just lean on Max for any support because, as we've seen, Max's feedback has produced a car that the second driver cannot work with. So what would be the point of Yuki wasting time in just doing more of that? He's got to find his own solution. And also, this is something that applies to all of the teams. The first benchmark that any driver has is your teammate, so he shouldn't waste Max's time. And yes, Max does not have time to mollycoddle yet another teammate. He is working on not only his own title defense, but working with the technical team to make sure they do what he asks them to do. And in terms of them being people who know each other, I'm not worried about that. They're just fine. They surely have a lot of banter together. They are on the same wavelength. They've known each other for years. I think they're going to have a good time. They'll get along. It'll be absolutely hunky-dory in that regard. I am not worried about that in them just having a general relationship, be it working or otherwise. But as drivers for Red Bull Racing, they've got completely different missions to complete. Max needs to try and help steer the team in the right direction, whilst Yuki's got to try and score as many points as possible to help him and the team out, for multitudes of reasons. So yes, whilst this is all documenting the actions undertaken in just 2 practice sessions, there's more to come, surely. The signs are pointed to, based on multiple interviews and what we've seen so far in the weekend, that Red Bull may be starting to get their act together and implementing changes of operations that will result in a car that's a lot easier to get on top of. And if it does all work out and Red Bull at least hang on to 3rd in the Constructors, that Max remains a title contender for the longest time possible and does not slip below 3rd in the championship, that maybe Yuki Tsunoda's efforts may be rewarded with maybe a 1-year contract extension into 2026, even though Honda would have departed over to Aston Martin. It won't matter anymore. Yuki would be his own man, his own driver, able to sign with any team that he wants. There'd be no need for Honda to get involved. They'd be just happy that he's still on the grid. And better yet, if he can really hold his own and go into next year even stronger with a car that is better suited to him and developed around him, the RB22, then maybe it could secure his medium-term future in Formula One. Maybe a future team leader at Red Bull if Max decides to leave the sport altogether or go to another team. There's a lot to consider here. It's very important for Yuki to get himself dialed in, and I'm really glad he's being realistic and not pompous, Liam. But yes, Yuki didn't set the world on fire, but hey, based on what we've seen, he's at least been able to put one out. And there also may be some fires being put out in regards to Lance Stroll and his first 2 races of the season, which according to raw stats and other factors, has been his best ever start. To find out why I think there is more to this instead of just dumb luck, watch this video next, straight after this one.